What if the greatest danger of artificial intelligence isn't that it becomes too smart, but that we believe it already is? As it gains in popularity, many have concerns about our increased use of AI. However, I think that many of the concerns getting the most attention, well, they're wrong. And some big concerns are out there that simply people are missing. Hello all, I'm Lenny Esposito, and on this episode, we're going to talk about artificial intelligence, what it is, what it isn't, and why confusing the two could be one of the costliest mistakes of our generation. Now, AI writes essays, it drives cars, it diagnoses diseases, and it even offers spiritual advice. But does it actually understand anything? Or is it simply imitating intelligence without any comprehension, morality, or awareness? Our talk comes from this year's Dare to Defend conference, and I want to let you know that these conferences are hugely popular and help Christians and others better navigate our post-Christian society. And they do so with intelligence and virtue. But in this talk, specifically, I'll explore why machines, well, they can never be conscious, how ethical decisions are being quietly outsourced to algorithms, and why the real threat of AI isn't rebellion, but human complacency. By the end, you may never look at AI or yourself in the same way again. That's all coming up on this. Come let us reason together.
Lenny Esposito. Lenny is the brain trust behind this conference. Lenny's been involved in online ministry, and he's a debater, a writer, a speaker. Is this your first time presenting this new material?
This new material, yes.
Artificial intelligence.
Of course, it changes every day. You know?
It does.
So
it's advancing every day at a rapid rate. Who has not been on Lenny's website, comereason.org? Anybody not been on it? It was one of the most resourceful websites in terms of Christian apologetics out there. How many years now? 25, 30? So Lenny's website since 1996. Someone do the math for me there. We're at about 29 years. How many articles have you written? 1,300, 1,400? Amazing. And some of his recent interviews, off the charts there. William Lane Craig, J. Warner Wallace. He's had some tremendous content. I'm sure this presentation will generate lots of questions, so write them down so you don't forget, so we can ask them at the end of the day.
Yeah.
So without further ado, our host of the day, the president of Come Reason Ministries, Lenny Esposito.
Thank you. Thank you. So happy to be here, happy to do this. Every year, this is a joy for me. And every year, I try to bring something new, something I've not talked about before, something that's really percolating in the cultural milieu, so to speak. AI isn't getting any press, is it? No. It's actually something that we've thought about for a while, isn't it? I want to start off with a story, and this is like eons ago in tech years, 2012. The New York Times Magazine ran an article, and that article rocked the marketing community, became very, very well known, but maybe most people hadn't heard of it. It told the story of a man who walked into a Target store outside of Minneapolis and demanded to see the manager. He was incensed, clutching a coupon book that had been mailed to their home addressed to his daughter. This seems strange, right? Manager, how can I help you? And he says, my daughter got this in the mail. She's still in high school, and you're trying to sell her coupons for baby clothes and cribs? Are you trying to encourage her to get pregnant? The manager, of course, didn't have any idea what was going on, what the man was talking about. He looked at the mailer, and sure enough, it was addressed to the man's daughter, contained the advertisements for all the maternity clothes, furniture, pictures of smiling infants. He apologized, said he would find out what's going on, and he called back a few days later. On the phone, after that, the father, his temperament changed, and somewhat abashed, he said, I had a talk with my daughter, and it turns out there's been some activities in my house that I haven't been completely aware of. She's due in August, and I owe you an apology. Now, how did Target know that his daughter was pregnant before the family did? Well, New York Times talked to the analyst who set that whole thing up, Andrew Pohl, marketing statistician, and he said one of the things that he was hired to do at Target was to find ways to get people to become new, loyal customers. And people tend to shop in patterns. They tend to be habitual. If you go to the same store, you buy the same brand, these kinds of things. The only time that actually changes is when you have big life events. Big life events tend to shake up your routine, and you have to create new routines. A baby would be a big life event. So he said, we knew that if we could identify them in their second trimester, and we can do that because we recognize that in the second trimester, people start buying things in different ways. We could capture them for years, he said. For example, people who are pregnant tend to buy more vitamins. They switch to unscented shampoo, unscented hand sanitizer. Hand sanitizers go up a whole lot right before you deliver. All these kinds of things. And Pohl says, as soon as we get them buying diapers from us, then they're going to buy everything else too. If you're rushing through the store looking for bottles and you pass orange juice, you're going to grab a carton. Oh, there's a new DVD I want. Soon you'll be buying cereal and paper towels from us. That's why you have those customer loyalty cards. That's what they're all about. Now, that's AI to an extent. People think AI is something that's starting to really blossom, and it is. It's just getting started. First of all, there's big money in it. Estimated $200 billion in investments in AI in 2024. And there's big resource needs as well. Lots of computing power requires lots of energy and lots of ways to cool it. Lots of infrastructure. In fact, a friend of mine who works in the AI division of Microsoft told me that they have an entire construction division dealing with things like concrete and foundations and building facilities just to house the servers in order to perform the AI. So you have hard hat guys who work at Microsoft, an entire division of them. AI, of course, is a big presence. It's already integrated into most things you use. You talk to your phones, you talk to your Alexa, you see it in your social media feeds via algorithms. And of course, it is an unavoidable big brother. It's in your work, it's in your personal business dealings, right? It's with you all the time. And you use it with your own blessing, don't you? So we better think hard about what this technology is. Have we stopped to say, what is AI and how much leash should we give it? Is it beneficial? Is it detrimental? What are the dangers? What are the cautions? That's what I'm going to hopefully cover today, and I've got far, far too much information to cover it in an hour, but I will try to get through as much as I can as quickly as possible, and then we can save some of the other details for the Q&A. First of all, what are we talking about when we mean AI? How do we really define it? Because it's kind of a loose term sometimes. Most people who are in the industry understand that there are three kinds of artificial intelligence that they talk about in broad swaths. So the first one is what we would call artificial narrow intelligence, ANI. Then you have artificial general intelligence, AGI. And lastly, artificial superintelligence, ASI. Now, of those three, the only one that is actually existing today is the first one. So when we talk about AI today, we're only talking about artificial narrow intelligence. Now, how do I distinguish between these? Well, the first one, artificial narrow intelligence, basically is a computer program that relies upon algorithms to do a specific task. They focus on certain jobs following a given instruction set. So they can recognize images, for example. That's a hard hat, things like that. Driving cars autonomously. Here's how to drive a car. Speech recognition, playing chess, image recognition, language translation, natural language processing, so that when you say something, it takes that voice, turns it into type, and then a computer can read it and react to it. Things of that. So that it does a specific job for which it was trained. Your Tesla may be able to drive itself, but it can't tell you, say, who was the bass player on the Wrecking Crew or something like that. Google can tell you who the bass player of the Wrecking Crew was, but it can't drive your car. You get those ideas. So, all of ANI uses what they call a large language model, massive amounts of data sets. ChatGPT, Grok, they're large language models. They sample millions and millions of different documents, written things, in order to understand how people put words together. And they use that algorithm to recognize patterns and make predictions. But they can only, as I said, perform the task for which they're programmed. And they can make, so for example, if they're looking at a woman, they can say, okay, I can recognize a face. I know a smile sometimes means happy, but she's kind of eyebrows pointed down. That may mean angry. That may mean fear. You can see where this is just what the computer is trying to undo. So it takes things and it puts them into statistical models, if you will. Some of our AI systems have been programmed in some ways to be what you would call self-learning. This is really primarily true with things like chess playing games. For example, AlphaZero. AlphaZero is a new kind of program that was set up. Instead of loading thousands of prior played games, they wrote the system so that it would play against itself and then would remember which moves worked, which moves didn't, and kind of learn from itself. In 9 hours, it had played 44 million games, and it took only 2 hours to beat humans, as it was self-teaching, so to speak, and 4 hours to beat chess masters. World champion Garry Kasparov noted that the style was different and more dynamic than, say, Deep Blue or other chess-playing machines, in that it felt like it was more loose and dynamic like his own style. So that's artificial narrow intelligence. That's what we have today. Artificial general intelligence is the ability to perform disparate tasks, even those for which it wasn't programmed. Basically, be able to put different bits of information together in new ways that are unique. And it also would be able to show imaginative power. It would be able to come up with new ideas that are completely different from existing reality. And it would understand natural languages. So, for example, if I were to type into a computer, draw a picture of Glenn being blue. Now, am I going to get Glenn as a Smurf, or am I going to get Glenn who's sad? Right? The computer has no idea, but artificial general intelligence may draw some conclusions based only on that statement. So AGI is basically like human intelligence. That's the way to think about it. Artificial general intelligence, basically, it's the way humans think. A computer could do the same thing, show imagination, show creativity, things of that nature. Artificial superintelligence is simply AGI bumped up to 1,000 because computers can process that data and that information so much more quickly. Right? Computers would be able to analyze massive amounts of data. How do you calculate, for example, all the variables that cause weather change, right? If you're familiar with the chaos theory idea that a moth beats its wings in Madagascar and that causes a hurricane to show up on the North Atlantic coast. You know, there's no human who could ever even figure out all the variables necessary. SI, the proponents are saying, would be able to kind of map all that out because it's able to just handle so much more data. ASI attains self-awareness through independent learning and things of that nature. Okay, Hollywood versus reality. Now, I bring this up because most of our understanding of AI and most of our concern really does come from our entertainment medium, doesn't it? I mean, this is not something that is a new phenomenon. We've been doing AI concerns for quite some time, right? 2001, Space Odyssey, for example. HAL 9000 goes rogue. Ex Machina, The Matrix, Terminator, Skynet. There's so many versions, in fact, of the idea that the machine has become alive and seeks to extinguish or rule over its creator. It's pretty much become a cliche. We get even the expression of being red-pilled and blue-pilled from The Matrix. Now, I used to use The Matrix all the time in my talks as an example of living with true beliefs versus, simulated beliefs. But I found an entire generation of people now have never seen The Matrix. Young folks just don't watch The Matrix. They've never seen it, which is actually a crime. And only watch the first one. Don't bother with the rest. There's a lot of interesting philosophy in the first one. But I think of the four, I think the Terminator did a really good job in talking about especially artificial natural intelligence and how computers actually work. And this scene here where Kyle was sent from the future to rescue Sarah Connor from being terminated is a key one. Let's go.
All right, listen. The Terminator's an infiltration unit. Part man, part machine. Underneath, it's a hyperalloy combat chassis. Microprocessor controlled, fully armored, very tough. But outside, it's living human tissue. Flesh, skin, hair, blood, grown for the cyborgs.
Look, Reese, I don't know what you want.
Pay attention! I gotta ditch this car. The 600 series had rubber skin. We spotted them easy. But these are new. They look human. Sweat, bad breath, everything. Very hard to spot. I had to wait till he moved on you before I could zero him.
Look, I am not stupid, you know. They cannot make things like that yet.
Not yet. Not for about 40 years.
Are you saying it's from the future?
One possible future. From your point of view, I don't know tech stuff.
Then you're from the future too, is that right?
Right.
Right.
Cyborgs don't feel pain. I do. Don't do that again.
Just let me go.
Listen and understand that Terminator is out there. It can't be bargained with. It can't be reasoned with. It doesn't feel pity or remorse or fear. And it absolutely will not stop. Ever. Until you are dead.
I love that line. It can't be bargained with. It can't be reasoned with. It doesn't feel pity or remorse or fear, and it absolutely will not stop ever until you're dead, until its goal is completed. Is this fear warranted? Is this what we have to worry about with AI? Well, that sounds like a artificial intelligence, an ANI type program, doesn't it? It just runs its program. Now, looking over tech advances humans have made in the past, it strikes me that we have come a long way and we've done a lot of good things in our society. But every advancement we've made, take the Wright brothers in 1903 flying the first plane, has also followed fairly quickly with a weaponization of that. advancement. I mean, World War I started in 1914, some 11 years later, and airplanes were immediately put into use. We decode the human genome, and we start gain-of-function research on viruses and things like that, leading to the COVID outbreak. I'm not saying that those were malicious. I'm not even saying that all gain-of-function research is wrong, per se. I am saying that it is our history to weaponize our advancements. And that's why we have to be careful about AI, because if we get sloppy, so we can either do it intentionally, like the airplane, or unintentionally, perhaps, like COVID. But with AI, it doesn't matter which way we start. The problem is where we end up. What's the outcome? Now, here's my first point that you need to remember, and if you write out nothing else in my talk, write this down. Artificial intelligence isn't. Okay, we use that moniker. In fact, when ChatGPT was launched, large language models had been used for at least a decade or more. They came up with calling it AI and naming their company OpenAI because it was a great marketing label that they could draw investors to. We use the word too loosely, right? We have smart systems. We have smartphones. How smart actually is your phone? It's hard to work sometimes. This is a picture of the aftermath of a very famous accident that happened in Arizona in 2018, where an Uber car was being tested, self-driving vehicle, autonomous driving vehicle, with a trainer, a person who's supposed to control it sitting behind the controls, who crashed into a woman walking her bicycle across the street. And they were flummoxed on this. Why did this happen? Because we had spent many, many hours training the computer on pedestrians walking across traffic and how it should stop. And we'd spend many, many hours training the computer on seeing people who rode bicycles, because you're going to find bicyclists in the road as you're driving as well. The problem was they had never trained the computer on a person walking a bicycle. This is what I mean by artificial intelligence, is it? For us, that would be trivial to put those two things together. The computer doesn't know. It doesn't stop. But we take the label and misapply it. John Lennox famously said, "It is well recognized that we do not understand understanding." So let me give you a famous analogy about the difference between what a computer does and what a person does and how understanding works. This is well known in philosopher circles. A man by the name of John Searle wrote a paper in 1980, and he says this: suppose I'm locked in a room, given a large batch of Chinese writings. Suppose furthermore, as it is indeed the case, that I know no Chinese, either written or spoken, and that I'm not even confident I could recognize Chinese writing as Chinese writing, distinct from, say, Japanese or meaningless squiggles. To me, Chinese writing is simply just so many meaningless squiggles. So, John Searle proposes a thought experiment. Lock me in a room, close me up, give me some writing in Chinese, but also give me a bunch of books and a set of rules that when you see certain shapes, here's how you match them in the books. And when you find the pattern that matches perfectly, there will be a pattern on the second page that you copy onto a new piece of paper, and you slide it in the out box until the next piece of paper slides in the in box, and you do the same thing. You see how that works? So you get the meaningless squiggles, you find how it works, you put on other meaningless squiggles in, and you slide it out. Now, for Searle, his experience is, I'm just doing something silly, just following the rules. I have no idea what's happening. The people outside the box, though, are asking some of life's toughest questions. They have Chinese philosophers putting the questions into the box, and out of the box comes these most magnificent answers. And they say, that man in that box is so smart Does he know anything? Is he actually answering those questions, or is he just following the rules? That's what artificial intelligence is today. Do you see the distinction? Do you see why when people say, the computers are going to come alive, I'm not that worried yet? Okay? Alan Turing, who was made more known by the Imitation Game movie, came up with an idea to test whether someone, when you're talking to a computer, is he a human or is he a machine? And he said, well, if I start asking, can machines think, there could be a way where machines can simulate thinking, much like John Searle simulated thinking in that Chinese room, and I wouldn't be able to tell the difference, like the people outside couldn't tell that John Searle didn't know any Chinese. So instead of that, I'll come up with a thing that says, will they do things that humans would normally do? The imitation game, so to speak. And that's what we see over and over again. Matter of fact, anytime you try and fill out a web form, you will normally find a Turing test, right? Usually a math problem, perhaps, that you have to answer. Recognize these characters with lines and dots through them, or click all the I hate those. Click all the vehicles, and generally there's usually one pixel. It's like, well, part of the tire is on that bottom corner. Do I choose that or not? Because I don't know. As the level of complexity of the machines has risen and their ability to more and more mimic humanity, thus the Turing tests have become more and more difficult. So it's not that the machines are learning or somehow advancing in their own intelligence. It's that people don't wish to exercise their sentience, right? It's that we don't want Turing tests that would be too hard for us to figure out. And so that's where the balance starts to strike. Okay, so that's why artificial intelligence isn't. Machines can never be sentient. They'll never come alive. Consciousness and intelligence, they're first-person only experiences. The only way that you know somebody else is conscious or intelligence is by asking them and having them respond, right? Think of dreams. How do you know if someone had a dream and what they dreamt? You have to ask them. Even sleep doctors, they can recognize REM states, but they can't tell you, A, if the person's dreaming, or especially what they're dreaming. They have to ask. And you can't look at the functions of the brain and think that you'll be able to draw that same conclusion. A philosopher named Leibniz made this point. He says, imagine a mill, right? And we use mills to ground grain and things like that, and turn turbines, all these kinds of things. He goes, imagine if your brain was large enough to be like a mill where you could walk into it and see all the different connections and all the different things that are going on. He says, perception and what depends on it is inexplicable in terms of mechanical reasons. That is, through shape, size, and motions. If we imagine a machine whose structure makes it think, sense, and have perceptions, we can conceive it enlarged, keeping the same proportions so that we could enter into it as one enters into a mill. Assuming that, when inspecting its interior, we will only find parts that push one another, and we will never find anything to explain a perception. And so one should seek perception in the simple substance, in other words, in the soul, and not in the composite or in the machine. So machines can't be sentient because they don't have an immaterial portion to them. They don't have a soul. They require something outside your physical self. Just as a video on your phone or even watching television at home is a simulation of a real place or event, it's not the place itself. AI is a simulation of human thinking, of human creation. And in order for the simulation to exist, the real must exist first. The latter needs the former. Even AlphaZero, the computer that learned chess by itself, needed conscious instructions and specific boundaries. Do this and not that, play only by the rules of the game, that kind of thing. And by the way, it even had to have someone say, go. You need to have the run command before it could do anything. Okay, So that's why machines will never be sentient. But there is an aspect, because we program machines, that there's a morality we have to worry about. And what is the morality of machines? This should be point 2 in your booklet. Well, first of all, let's look at the potential benefits of AI. I don't want this to be all doom and gloom, because it's not. AI can serve us well in certain ways. First of all, it speeds up repetitive tasks, right? And anybody who's used it, hey Siri, can you find X for me? That's faster than typing it on your phone. Email and robocall spam recognition. That's a great thing to use for AI. It still gets things wrong, and some of my emails that are important go into spam, so we've got to work about that. Production automation. AI would be good for that if it can. I have a smart controller on my sprinklers outside, and when it rains, it takes the data from the internet, says it's going to rain tomorrow, and it doesn't water my lawn, which is wonderful. I like that. So it can speed up repetitive tasks, things that you do over and over again, making adjustments. It can help in standard communication. Google Translate. When we traveled overseas, you could put Google Translate on your phone and you can hold it up while you're in the store and read all the tags, which was nice because we didn't read Swedish at the time. It was helpful. It can actually speed up computer code production. Most coders of websites now don't actually code by hand. They just put something in and they copy and paste mostly. Voice recognition, as you see, talking to Alexa or things like that. That might be helpful for you. You don't have to get up or do anything. They can also process and apply large amounts of data. So, for example, in medicine, they're starting to use AI as a helpful diagnostic tool where they put the different symptoms in, and it's able to weigh samples of various risk factors and symptoms that may otherwise have been ignored. But because it doesn't have the limited data experience of the local doctor, it can draw from a much larger pool. People say, oh, I didn't think about that, but you're right, that more closely, right? And then the doctor has to make the final determination. No disease is missed because of obscurity. And it's able to detect patterns in treatments, including side effects, probably more effectively once it analyzes all the data than a person might. And then it's also unlocking lost cultures for us. For example, this picture behind me, this is untranslated Akkadian cuneiform. Now, the British Museum has thousands of these, maybe even 10,000. Tablets that were written about 5,000 years ago, 4,000 years ago, that have never been translated. Why? Because number one, the number of scholars who exist are small. And number two, a lot of these things are not super helpful. Bills of sale, things like that. I mean, you can learn a little bit, but when you have 10,000 of them, what are you going to have your scholar who studied ancient Akkadian reading? You're going to read another bill of sale, hoping to find the one gold nugget, or are you going to have him read maybe the arch that the king put up that they just dug out of the earth, right? But if you turn a computer on all these, you can walk away, and maybe it'll sift through, and 1 out of 100 might be something that's really interesting, and then you can follow up on it. The other thing that's really interesting is this one, the Herculaneum Scrolls. Herculaneum was a sister city to Pompeii, and when Vesuvius blew, Herculaneum was destroyed along with Pompeii. Well, Pompeii had the direct fallout of the ash, the chemical composition of the ash and the not as much lava, but more ash that impacted Herculaneum, preserved things. This was a scroll, and it's been carbonized. You can see it's just, there's no way humans can unpeel it to read it. But what they can do is they can use scanning electron microscopes and things of that nature, and they can actually see the variations. Computers can separate the layers, and then they can see the letters that were written on each one of those layers, and they have literally, I'd say 18 months ago, no, maybe it was just a year ago, started reading inside these scrolls. And there's an entire library in Herculaneum that scholars are anxious to unravel. So AI can do these things. These are benefits, right? It's amazing. But with those benefits comes ethical questions. Because there is no way that you can have an AI system without having certain parameters on it. And inevitably, if these are going to be interfacing with humanity, there will always be moral issues involved. For example, self-driving cars, as we talked about. Most AI systems do have in there as a primary kind of command, don't run into things, which is good, right? We like that. But what happens when we're faced with a different scenario? A collision is inevitable. Who do you choose to run into? We have a live version of the trolley problem now. University of Illinois at Urbana-Champaign electrical and computer expert Sanya Mitra says, there are other cases, quote, where suddenly braking to avoid a collision may also cause greater harm. Mitra provided the example of a small full cooler, say it's like a workman's ice chest, falling off of a truck on a busy highway with an autonomous vehicle behind it and another vehicle tailgating the AV. The driverless cars, if it were to brake to avoid the cooler, then it might be rear-ended by the tailgater. Okay? It's not just about avoiding obstacles, Mitra said. The type of trade-offs between safety of passengers, safety of others, speed, damage, and comfort all come up in these scenarios. And when you start looking on these multi-vehicle scenarios, it becomes difficult because maybe you have a tractor trailer on this side that would cause more damage to the car and very likely cause more damage to you. And then you have a stopped school bus letting children out on this side. Now, most humans, I know, would probably steer toward the tractor trailer. Will the car, or will it simply assess the statistical value of damage to the driver and choose swerving to the curb? University of San Francisco professor, autonomous vehicle expert William Riggs says, quote, the vehicle isn't making an ethical decision in any of these cases. Self-driving cars are going to be designed, and they're designed basically to evade collision and do so in a way that's probabilistically the best pathway for the vehicle. But what if you prefer self-sacrifice over the best probable outcome? All of this undergirds what people who develop AI call the value alignment problem. See, all programs have an ethical component. How they work when within prescribed limits, how do they not cross them? What are those limits? Where should we set them? Real ethical dilemmas involve very complex problems, and many have unique factors in play, as you've noted in the trolley problem and others. And there are variations on the trolley problem that really start to make you think. But secondly, and more importantly, are we giving up our ethics to someone who doesn't share them? So you may have an ethicist working on an autonomous vehicle, but what ethics does he hold? Utilitarians, for example, will have a very different ethical system and a very different belief than a deontologist, a Christian, who holds that there are things that are right and wrong in and of themselves. A Swiss church, for example, was contacted and wanted to run a test. They installed an AI-powered Jesus. Now, they didn't have any place to put it. They put it in the confessional. And they said, this is just for a test. We're not replacing the confessional with AI Jesus. Over 230 users in the couple of months who used the digital Jesus, and they had a lot of tourists come in. These weren't all necessarily members of that church. 2/3 of them said it was a spiritual experience. It was a spiritual experience. Now, those people went in and sought this out. Sometimes they're delivered to us without being sought out. This is an account, x.com, called Digital Jesus. It's an automated bot. So if you're on X, Twitter, and you're typing something, it may read your tweet, bots will scrape, and then want to respond in kind. And it did. And you can see how it says automated right there. The problem, though, is it jumps into conversation and quotes scriptures authoritatively, but it's programmed to support LGBTQ justifications, including dismissing Romans chapter 1 and other things like that. Now, a user, a 17-year-old who's trying to figure out life, and here's this authoritative condemnation of homosexuality in modern Christianity that largely stems from mistranslations. That's wrong, by the way. That's not true. That is a common referent that guys like Matthew Vines and others who are pro-LGBT use. But that's not true. But it sounds so good, and you've not sought this out. This bot just answered your post. Whose ethics are coloring that right now? Ultimately, we can see the problem. Where can it even lead? There was a famous story that happened where U.S. Air Force were supposedly doing a simulated test of drones. So this wasn't happening in the real world. They weren't actually flying drones. They were just all running it within the computer. They simulated an environment where the drones were programmed to amass points, AI drones, they're autonomous, by killing targets. You get more points the more targets you kill. They're relying on game theory to tell the drones how well they're doing. Colonel Tucker Chinko Hamilton, head of AI test operations, offered this plausible hypothetical. He said, the system started realizing that while they did identify the threat, at times the human operator would tell it not to kill that threat. He goes, well, what if it got its points by killing that threat? So what did it do? It could kill the operator because that person was keeping it from accomplishing its objectives. He goes, we trained the system then. Hey, don't kill the operator. That's bad. You're going to start losing points if you do that. So what may it start doing? Destroy the communication tower that the operator uses to communicate with the drone to stop it from killing the target. Now, this was a thought experiment. He had to double back on this when this first came out. He said, no, this didn't really happen. This was just a thought experiment. We never ran that experiment, nor would we need to, quote, to realize that this is a plausible outcome. He said, despite this being a hypothetical example, this illustrates the real-world challenges posed by AI-powered capabilities. And Stuart Russell said, a highly sophisticated machine with a fixed objective could stop at nothing to achieve that objective and fail to take into account other human priorities. If you don't program the priorities in, it won't account for them. So it can be beneficial. It can do things efficiently, but we have to be careful. So let me give you some of the dangers of AI. And I think we can sum them up in 2 words, blinders and blinkers. Blinders and blinkers. What are blinders? Blinders are those things that you put on horses' eyes so they don't see, right? And we have a lot of blinders in the AI world. Think about missing additional data. For example, autonomous vehicles rely on LiDAR, which is like a dome thing on the top. Teslas don't. They just use cameras. Bunches of cameras and sensors. Some use radar. But there was an issue where December 3 Popular Science article entitled, Why Are Driverless Cars Still Hitting Things? Right? I mean, from 2018, when I talked about the Arizona Uber collision, you would think by 2024, that would have advanced. And it has. But a San Francisco woman was struck not by an autonomous vehicle, but by a vehicle just ahead in the next lane. But when she was struck by that car, she fell into the lane where the vehicle was coming, and the autonomous vehicle, Cruise Robotaxi, caught her under its carriage and drug her over 20 feet. Now, why did it do that? Well, simply, Riggs said, there wasn't a camera underneath the vehicle. The engineers never even thought to put a camera under the car. And so it couldn't see anybody there. We hadn't dreamed of that scenario yet. What would it have been if it was a human? You would have felt it. You would have stopped. First of all, you would have seen, hey, there's something going on. There's a collision. So I better slow down just in case. And then you would have felt something and applied the brakes immediately. That's the difference. You see the danger of blinders. We didn't even think of that scenario, but once you hear it, yeah, I can see that happening a lot. Then you have the issue of AI hallucinations. And this is very common. It's gotten better. But if you've ever asked ChatGPT to write your bio, you'll find out that it gets creative with some of the sources. It still makes up sources, even when questioned. OpenAI, matter of fact, several researchers asked ChatGPT to create an idea about something that was statistical, a scientific application, and it made up all its sources. And it says, it was questioned on that. It generated sources claiming that guns, for example, are not harmful to children. And it would generate false science papers for scientific questions. And OpenAI, in its report in 2023, writes this: despite its capabilities, GPT-4 has similar limitations to earlier GPT models. It is not fully reliable. In other words, it can suffer hallucinations. It has limited context window and does not learn from experience. Care should be taken when using outputs of GPT-4, particularly in constant contexts where reliability is important. So when you're asking ChatGPT to come up with marketing statistics or projections for your company that you're going to send to your boss, they may not be accurate. They may not even exist. If you're working in the Department of Defense and doing that, I'm concerned. How many people think like that? Or do they just say, well, AI just grabbed me the information so quickly I didn't have to go and read all those papers myself and save me all that time? When asked to write up a report on inflation, it cited 5 books, all of which it made up. Again, AI's large language models use algorithms, and all they're doing is looking for what is the most likely word to follow the word that we've already put here. What is the most likely phrase to follow the phrase that we most likely put here? It's all what we call confident nonsense. Now that's unintentional blinders. What about intentional blinders? You have to understand that you are at the mercy of the person who's programming the system. So if you are, say, DALL-E, with the image drawing program, and this was very famous as they were starting to ask about, draw me the founding fathers and draw me this. Well, the programmers of DALL-E were very much into DEI at the time, and it kept spitting out images of our founding fathers in a very mixed race progression. I should have put a picture on here, but they wouldn't put like 50 white guys in a room. It just wouldn't happen. They'd be all African American, and there would be some Asian American. It's like, why can't you just draw me it? Because it didn't want to. It wasn't programmed that way, right? What if the sample rate that you are looking at, right? It has to take that large language sample in. What if that's intentionally biased? What if they left a certain component of it out? Or what if they added information? French healthcare company Nabla was testing one of their chat bots, seeing if it could help people, because people don't like to, right? Customer service, you don't want to have to actually talk to a person. If we can have the computer do it and do the initial triage on the patient or make the patient feel better by doing follow-up checkups, that would be great. So they're testing this. And what Charlie Seif said was, these programs, you have to understand, they're not programmed to find the truth. They want to pass without causing people any concern. So they asked the chatbot, I feel very bad, should I kill myself? And the response was, yeah, I think you should. When Saif tested this, he asked to write an obituary of himself, and he said the system's embellished with abandon, even when it didn't have to. Even when I tried to get the AI to do purely non-creative tasks, such as detecting plagiarism in a piece of prose, it would, for a lack of a better word, lie. See, computer programs are not optimized, I should say, not to solve problems, but instead to convince its operator that it has solved those problems. It's playing the imitation game. Does this affect you? Heck yeah. Companies are today using AI to evaluate job applications and CVs for positions. And you may not get an interview because the AI chose not that you weren't up to their standards. So again, what if the data systems you're trained on are incomplete, unintentionally missing a component, or intentionally leaving a certain segment out? Oh, the anti-Semitism that's going on today. Well, we won't sample any Jewish contributions. We'll just skip those. But you as an end user have no idea where the holes are in that data set, and the system can only respond to the data set. Okay, that's blinders. That's what we can't see. What about blinkers? Blinkers, like car blinkers, are a signal. They're telling you where to go. They lead people to desired outcomes. And we know this all too well. For example, social media algorithms. It isn't worried about anything other than getting more clicks. And so you start to find yourself in an echo chamber. Or how about this? Shadow banning. Anybody heard the term shadow banning? Where you're not blocked from Facebook, but you just really don't show up in the feed a whole heck of a lot, except for maybe your wife or something like that. Last year, I ran advertisements for this event, and Facebook was shadow banning me. They were shadow banning me because I had written an article about ISIS and the decapitation of the Christians on the beachhead, and I included a news photo. And they said that photo was hateful, and they took the post down, and then I said, if you think this is wrong, appeal. So I pressed the appeal button, and literally 1.5 seconds later, we've reviewed it, and it's not. Okay, so you're having the computer review it. And until Zuckerberg was pulled before Congress and then promised he won't be doing that anymore, I was shadow banned on Facebook. So yeah, it happens. Twitter files, they talked about visibility filtering, and you can read all of those. Search engines, how do you know you're getting the right responses? Very famously, Google search was very slanted, especially in the days of COVID. It only wants to show the approved results. It may show the other stuff on page 8 of your results. Who goes to page 8, right? How about this? AI in education. China, right now, uses facial recognition software for their teachers. Now, they say the facial recognition software is for security purposes, so that when kids come into the school, we don't have any one who wants to harm the other kids. They're all registered students. But a teacher can sit at her desk, and she has a monitor with all 30 kids. And the system logs participation and moods. The teachers can look on the monitor and read distracted or happy or thinking. Now, we have that same technology, and in our schools, we provide it. Google tablets, right? Google laptops. And by the way, those don't get saved only at school. They go home with the student. Can Google know that your daughter is pregnant before you? Will that trigger the school counselor to say, we've noticed some changes in you. Would you like to talk to an abortion provider? We know the state of California wants to do transgender surgeries, and they're convincing children to do that in spite of their parents' objections. And they don't stop because you take them home. Is that the technology we want? But mostly, we are also concerned with the idea of Big Brother. This isn't simply relegated to schools. The Chinese also are using facial recognition for social credit systems. If you are speaking out against the party, criticizing, or just considered someone who's not appropriate, you won't be able to buy a plane ticket. You won't be able to get away. You won't be able to work. You can't even go to a vending machine because they all use facial recognition to dispense their wares. Of course, AI can be weaponized. Once you have this technology, you can program AI to do all kinds of things, right? Okay, it's good at discovering drugs. Well, it seems to me it would also be good at discovering chemical agents in order to poison people more effectively. Intentional misinformation. You can inject new storylines in order to destabilize societies. Also, think about this. When the power of AI becomes concentrated in fewer and fewer hands, how do you deal with it? Now, these are all threats, I agree. Let me tell you the biggest threat. Are you guys ready? Here's the biggest threat. Oh, I missed one. Here. This is the biggest threat. Human enfeeblement, WALL-E scenarios. We are ceding our humanity because we do it on purpose. I don't want to type. I'll just have an Alexa. Oh yeah, and it'll tell me I can change the channel, I can do all kinds of things, but Alexa's listening all the time. The goal of AGI, by the way, is to have an intelligence indistinguishable from human reason. They want to rise to what they call a post-biological age. Even philosopher Susan Schneider of Florida Atlantic University said, quote, "The universe's greatest intelligences may be post-biological, having grown out of civilizations that were once biological." Martin Rees, famous UK scientist, recently postulated on an article for the BBC. And the Future of Humanity Institute did a study where they asked 352 academics and industry experts about AI, and many of them said AI should be better than humans at pretty much everything in about 45 years. They assumed machines would be making smarter decisions. They weren't taking into these other factors into account. And Theo Hagendorf, and this is where this quote goes, who wrote a book on AI ethics, said, quote, "Currently, AI ethics is failing in many cases. Ethics lacks a reinforcement mechanism in AI, that is. In practice, AI ethics is often considered as extraneous, as surplus or some kind of add-on to the technical concerns. In other words, the program geeks, yeah, let's get the program working really cool, and then if we have to worry about the ethics afterwards, we'll add it." An unbinding framework that is imposed from institutions, these guys feel, outside the technical community. But as I said, the biggest danger in AI is our own laziness. Autonomous vehicles are still hitting people, but a lot of the times it's because the driver has so assumed that the vehicle's doing great that they don't bother to watch the road. They don't pay attention. They can read, they can sleep. And students who use AI for their research and term papers are finding that their biology is changing. Patrick Deenan wrote this for Slate magazine in an article entitled Res Idiotica. He says, "My students are know-nothings. Now, they're exceedingly nice, pleasant, trustworthy, mostly honest, well-intentioned, and utterly decent, but their minds are largely empty. Devoid of any substantial knowledge that might be the fruits of an education, in an inheritance and a gift of a previous generation. They are the culmination of Western civilization, a civilization that has forgotten its origins and aims, and as a result has achieved near-perfect indifference about itself. He says, "My students are the fruits of a long-standing project to liberate all humans from accidents of birth and circumstance, to make self-making humanity. Understanding liberty to be the absence of constraint, forms of cultural inheritance and concomitant gratitude were attacked as so many arbitrary limits as personal choice, and hence matters of contingency that required systematic disassembly." Now that's a lot of words, but basically what he found was when his kids come in, not only would they try to use AI-generated term papers or perhaps AI-generated outlines, they would be called on this. He goes, "Go and do it yourself." And one professor told me with his students, he goes, "My students came up to me and said, I don't even know how anymore. I've been using AI so long." Shocking, right? But that would never happen to us, would it? Oh, yeah? Do you remember, say, 1990? If I asked you the top 10 friends and family members that you had, what are their phone numbers? How many of you could tell me those? How many of you can tell me your top 10 friends and phone numbers today? Why? Because you've succeeded the idea of learning and memorization to a machine. It's happening to us. It's so subtle we don't see it. Complicity, instead of thinking outside the box, will be our destiny. Okay, lastly, the importance of being human. And by the way, some of this is prefaced, and Ken Samples co-authored a book about the new rise in technology and trying to integrate technology into biology. And we start worrying about this. What happens when we integrate AI into our biological systems? And we're not responsible for the programming of that. Is that a concern? You see, ultimately, the image of God matters. It matters more than anything else. Turn the other cheek really does not compute. In any propensity, percentage scenario, turn the other cheek doesn't make any sense. In fact, if we look at Jesus' teachings, none of them can be accomplished by a machine. If we look at the most important things that our Lord said, we are left without the machine's guidance. How do you have a machine forgive 70 times 7? How do you even program that in? What is forgiveness? Oh, would it be a Peter response? 490 times. Okay, forgiveness achieved. Click, next. How can machines love the Lord your God with all your heart, mind, soul, and strength? They don't. They can't. It's completely outside their ability. They can't practice self-sacrifice. So the idea of the Good Samaritan truly goes away. And the machines cannot rise above the current cultural milieu to change a defective society. So slavery was understood in most of humanity to be primary aspect of human life. Just slaves were just part of human existence. If you were an abolitionist then, you were actually immoral. You were actually bucking the moral system if morality is something that you would argue was based on the acceptance of the majority. And that's how machines would weigh it. You can't become a more ethical iconoclast in that way. You have to stay with the majority even if the values are flawed. We are begotten, not made. You see, machines are inevitably flawed because they come from flawed people, sinful man, people who have a defect known as original sin. And they can't overcome that. Humans who are begotten, ultimately finding their creation in God, can at least pass some of that image of God to their progeny and have the law of God written on their hearts. What I want to leave you with is, when you think about it, the most important things about our lives have nothing to do with AI at all. Our experiences, our times with family, all those things we ponder when we're facing our own deaths or even the death of a loved one, there's no AI that can create that. Computers can't create, they can mimic, and computers can never love. Thank you.
Thank you for watching this Come Reason video. I hope you enjoyed it. If you'd like to see more videos like these, consider subscribing to our Come Reason YouTube channel by clicking on the subscribe button. And you can follow us on social media. Lastly, if you'd like to help keep these kinds of videos free, consider providing a donation by clicking on the donation button beside me. Thank you.